Well, hello, I'm here with QCI Pod and with Renita DiStefano. And we're going to have a really important discussion today about data sovereignty and cybersecurity, how they meet, what it means. Renita and I have similar overlap and in some cases aligned, maybe not aligned, but we're going to explore that today together about this incredibly important area. So Renita, just to start with, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you developed your opinion and your background in data sovereignty and cybersecurity?
Sure. So I'll start with, first and foremost, I am a member of the Great Seneca Nation and a matriarch within the tribe for within my clan and within my family. And so I've spent the greater part of 30 years in information technology and in cybersecurity, working for the tribe, both for the government as well as
Tribal government.
the tribal government and the gaming and hospitality side. So I worked with the gaming side for a little more than 17 years, rising to the role of the chief information officer. That was the role that I held when I left the organization, all on good terms. But, I felt like I had achieved what I wanted to do, which was to build an information technology team and a cybersecurity team along the way. And as I'm approaching, I'm going to call it the legacy phase of my career, felt like it was important for me to kind of give back and to share my knowledge and my expertise and my experience to help other tribes be able to get themselves in a better position. I always say, until I run out of gas, I don't know when that is. It's not today. So it's not today. So I'm still going and still going strong. And so, again, trying to help as many tribes as I can for as long as I can.
So I guess let's just start with, what is ownership, sovereignty? What does it mean? Is it, and I'll kind of say, difference between, is it just an IT resource or is it something more than that? Because people sometimes get confused and they say, isn't it just cybersecurity? I'd really love to hear your perspective on what is data sovereignty and ownership of data, I guess.
Yeah, so simply put, sovereignty and data sovereignty is an extension of sovereignty, is the ability to control and govern and manage your own data. But sovereignty is really more of a verb, if you will, because it's something that you exercise. It's something that you assert. And tribes do this in many ways as it relates to fishing rights, hunting rights, political borders in all manner. And I'm not an attorney. I don't begin to say
You're
that
an IT person, I believe.
Yes. Yeah. I'm a business executive with an IT background is how I describe myself. And so I'm not, an expert on sovereignty and, other than it is your sovereign inherent right to exercise sovereignty or control, self-determination, governance, those rights that are inherently yours. An extension of that is data sovereignty. An opinion that I've developed over time is that you can't have data sovereignty without data security. And that's because if you don't have control over your data anymore, then you can't be sovereign. You can't exercise your sovereignty over that, right? Once somebody steals your data, or even worse, you give it away, right? And we'll talk about that.
Accidentally.
Or you give it away unexpectedly or surprising, it should be a surprise, that you have lost control of your data. Either it's stolen or you've given it away.
How might you give it away? Let's talk about that. I don't know if you don't mention anyone specific, but let's something you've seen. I've seen it happen as well, but you give me an example. And by the way, the most recent example, Renita, I saw, goodness, about 2 weeks ago, when someone offered to sell a nation's data back to them. And I was like, well, this is new.
Right. That was, I don't think it's new. I've heard not data, but intellectual property, language and culture artifacts and that sort of thing. So it's history repeating itself, right? But back to your question on how would you accidentally, just unintentionally give your data away? And that comes through the use of partnerships, right? I don't know very many, certainly gaming operations, that have their own casino management system or their own data analytics software that they've developed for themselves. There are a few, but not many, right? But when you join into a partnership, you have to do what's called due diligence, which is you have to, first of all, vet your partners, and just like you would in a marriage, right? You have to vet your partners and make sure that they are deserving of the trust that they want to earn, right? On top of that, you have to contract for data sovereignty. And I talk a lot about this because there are concepts that must be built into contracting for data sovereignty. Number one, data ownership. You mentioned that, right? Which is it should be very, very clear at the outset, even before we talk about when you're reviewing the contract, that should happen way before then. When you establish during the RFP process or whatever procurement process you're going through, that it's very clear if you intend to do business with us as a nation, that we own the data and we will govern and manage and put the governance or the rules around what can happen with that data. How can you use it? Can it be monetized? Can you sell it? Right? All of
Probably
those.
no.
Yeah, and what happens, and I always say this, and people, I get a good laugh, but it's not that funny. Is you need to have a good prenup, which is what happens when you want to get a divorce from that partner and you're no longer, in need of their services. And so, what's going to happen to your data? Not only you can, say, well, it's my data, give it back. But what is the format and the time and the amount of data that you're going to get back? Is it all of it? Is it the last 9 months? Is it, so those kind of conversations need to happen way before you're entering into a contract, but certainly during the contract review, you have to establish data ownership, data governance, data use, what you can use it for and what you can't use it for, a good prenup, as well as stewardship. One of the important elements of being a tribal nation is we're stewards of a lot of things. We're stewards of our language, of our culture, of our history, of our oral history, those kinds of things,
Right.
of our land, the environment, all of those things. Those things
And
are
the
not
data.
foreign to us. Yet they're sometimes overlooked in the data aspect because, there can be a misinterpretation or a misunderstanding of who are the caretakers of the data. And I hear this a lot in conversations where folks say, well, that's in the cloud, they're taking care of all of that for us. And I saw your eyebrows go
You
up.
still hear that.
Yeah, and they have stopped, patch management, for example. They're still the custodians of the data or
What
stewards
is
of.
patch management and why is it important?
Well, so patch management is the practice of keeping your operating systems, basically all of your systems alive and healthy, right? And so from time to time, when we're taking care of our physical selves, right, we're making sure that we're going to the doctor, that we're getting, certain treatments, or we're getting certain analysis and diagnosis and making sure that we're healthy. Those same practices apply to the systems that are under your care, custody, and control. And so it's important because when they are weak, just like your immune system, they can be vulnerable to exploitation or in the physical body, illness, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying around the caretaker. And when I think about data and being the caretaker of the data, I always like to try and draw an analogy. And the closest physical thing that I have is water, because it flows through your land, it flows through your area of sovereignty, and it doesn't sit still, right? It's actually constantly moving, and you can redirect it, you can change it, you can keep it clean, you can do all sorts of things with it. And in many ways, I would say, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, but it's the closest analogy. I don't know if you've got a better one, but when we talk about it's the caretaker of the flow of data. One thing you can't do with data, and this is when you were talking about the uses and how it's in the business, and that was so important. One thing you can't do is just stockpile it. That's not caretaking, actually. Caretaking means it's more like a language. You can't just caretake a language. You actually have to use the language. Like I know how to basket weave, and I can say, I haven't practiced in a while. If I wanted to look after the art of basket weaving, I would have to keep basket weaving all the time and show others how to do it, and I would get better at basket weaving. Data is closer to basket weaving and how we look after things. And water, I don't know Which way would you go? Are these good analogies to describe what is that caretaker role? Would you add to that, Renita?
Yeah, they're both great analogies. I think about data because we always talk about data flow, right? And so I
Yeah,
think
that's
about
right.
it. It's true that there are elements that apply that you can conceptually apply those concepts to data that you do with water. We talk about water quality, right? There's elements of data quality as well, right? The integrity of the water. Is it safe to drink, right?
Where did it come from?
Yeah, where did it come from?
Right.
And what are you using it for? So you would use, potable water differently than you would use sewage water, right? Some of it you want to get rid of because it's no good anymore. Or, some of you want to definitely keep clean and pristine and immediately available. Like I need to turn my tap on and have that data, right, or water immediately available. Some of it is like it's okay if it's, in storage, or it's okay if it's somewhere else, but all of those points, if you will, points in time have to be considered when we're talking about data. And certainly data stewardship is an element of that, which is, we often talk about, who owns it, but data stewardship is very, very important as well. Not only what is it being used for, but who's using it. Because data ownership is typically not at the highest level with the tribal leadership, but there are culture keepers, and there are owners of health information, and there are owners, and keeping those moving parts and people engaged is probably one of the hardest things that I've ever done, is making sure that executives are still at the table and not, going back to your point, saying, well, that's an IT thing. Right? IT is typically the custodians of data and information. We'll keep it alive, and we'll keep it healthy, we'll keep it secure on what it is. And that's where governance comes into play, where it has to be a shared common understanding of what all of those things, all of those decisions that have been made. And the only way that you can do that is to write it down. And that's where I think, again, one of the hardest things to do is to get a shared common understanding of your data, who owns it, who's the custodians, and who are the keepers of that data, and what are they going to use it for.
Custodian, I really like, and stewardship I really like as concepts, and I really agree with that. You mentioned in passing cybersecurity, and that really is the role of IT, I think, in this. So you've got this water, this tap, you can turn on, people can see the data. But how does IT fit into this picture with cybersecurity? Where does that, like, what's the role of cybersecurity in data sovereignty?
So IT, if you think of us as practitioners, it's like talking to your doctor, right? You have a general practitioner. They went to med
Right.
school, right? And they understand how the body works. But then you have specialists, similar to, like, you wouldn't ask your dentist to do cardiology work,
I hope
right?
not.
Right? Even though they both went to med school, right? There are specialists. And so cybersecurity experts are specialists in the practice of data protection, data governance, those concepts. Where they fit in, if you will, is messaging to leadership in the value proposition. What is the value of the work that we do? And it's often approached in kind of a shock and awe, let's scare the heck out of everybody kind of way. What I would propose is that we move away from the stories. They're going to take our data. They're going to steal
Yeah.
they're going to breach our
Because
system.
you have to use it, right?
Right. And move towards those business and tribal government and community conversations to make it a value proposition to say, for the medical, we're going to have access to your diagnostic information, and you're going to be able to get the medicine that you need. If it's a hospital, we're going to be able to take care of the elders and the children and everybody who's in the hospital, right? Because if you think about it from a value proposition, at least for me, and I think many folks think about it this way, our elders, and I just became one recently.
I don't believe it.
Yeah, it was hard for me to grasp that, but our elders are national treasures. They are our language keepers and our stories and our oral orators, right? The life safety conversations about protecting their health and their welfare are so important as well. Just kind of driving it home, for security practitioners, their job is to know all the things that a cardiologist or a specialist would know, and then communicate that to leadership to say, this is what it's going to take to get that done. This is what it's going to take to make sure that you have business continuity, that your casinos can continue to drive revenue, that your health practitioners are going to be able to provide the health and medical services that your citizens need, that your cultural artifacts are going to be available to you when there's a reason they're preserving language, right? That they're going to be available to you and the 7 generations in the future when you need those.
7 generations. Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of generations, right? That's conceptually, that's how we need to be thinking about this, and less about, sometimes you talk to cybersecurity people and you hear the alphabet soup, right? The DNS and DHCP and all the the letters that it makes people immediately their eyes glaze over. They don't want to talk about it, right? And that's why it's often talk to IT, because I don't know how to do that. Similar to asking me to split the atom, right? I can't do that either, and I can't play the piano. So what I can do is to translate those concepts into, what does this mean for the business? What does it mean for the tribe?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm working on the piano. I would say I'm just a beginner. I'm having a wonderful time learning. It's a great learning skill. When we think about cybersecurity and the fear and all these other things, and I watch people do this. They're like, oh, we've got to lock all the data up. I would describe that, in my view, that's like the opposite of what we need to do. We need to expose it in secure and effective ways, because it is something that flows through the community. It flows through the business. And without that flow, you won't see the value from it. So we've got this data sovereignty theme and the cybersecurity theme. Well, we've got this extra thing that the data is the lifeblood of so much. I'm sure you have a very strong opinion about language and the importance there, the tribal native language, right? But it's within a business, it's the lifeblood of the business. I don't know if you want to juxtapose those or just talk about them, but tell us about how you get people not to be frightened of using it and engaging with it. Like, how does that work? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that question up, because when we talk about changing the thought leadership, how we're thinking about cybersecurity and shifting away from that fear, shock, and awe, or afraid to do anything concept, and business enablement, right? I always just used to say, on the other side of the wires is the business, right? And the way that I like to think about it is, it should be available just in time to the right person for the right purpose. Right. And so if you're always thinking about that versus locking it down, and trust me, I've put all 153 controls of the NIST in place. Right. I've done it. And I make a joke about this, which is, if you are doing cybersecurity like I used to cook, which is just turn it on high and walk away, right? You're going to burn some stuff. So you can't approach it. You always have to poll your user community and understand who's using it and what are they using it for, and make sure they have that data information available to them in a secure way without causing impact on productivity and that transformation that we talk about.
Yeah, I hear you on the productivity and the access, and I deal with the challenges around this all the time. And one of the things that has jumped out at me is you can often have different levels of control. So, for example, if you have someone's social security number, the first question is, can you delete it? In my mind, right? Like, do we really need that? Like, because that's a really big deal to hold that. And if you really have to hold it, let's not share that around, because almost no one needs it. But as you think about partitioning of data for different areas, which I think is one of the critical things for security, I'd like you to also explain NIF, was it? What is that? How did you do it? Tell us about, why is it important? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has created a framework of standards for the federal government and for the general public as well, to say if you are going to build a building, it has to have this for plumbing and this for electrical and these standards for HVAC and so on and so forth. And those standards are in place if you're building a home for safety purposes, right? For a lot of purposes, but for safety purposes is one of those things. And cybersecurity is no different. So there are multiple frameworks that are in place. If you think about, remember back in the day, you mentioned Social Security's private information.
Yeah,
was the
super
talk of
private
the town.
Information.
Yeah, private information was the talk of the town. You got to protect it. You got to protect it. And there were laws that were created around protection of personally identifiable information. And then the next thing that was talked about was health information, right? And what we learned from that was that you have to protect health information just like you have to protect private information. And then credit card information was the hot topic. So you got to protect that. But in all of those scenarios, people still need to be able to see and use health information to provide services and health outcomes that positive health outcomes, hopefully, right, for its constituents. And the same is true when we had the conversations about credit card information. You can't just stop taking credit cards, right? You'll go out of business. I can't think of a way to keep folks in business without, the use of credit cards. So you can't just turn it off and say we're not going to use it, right? That's not the way to go. You have to put things in place that make it as easy as possible for the transaction to flow, for you to get paid and the customer to get what they want. Right? It's about customer satisfaction as well as being able to use that information. So those frameworks are put in place to give you guidance for these are the rules generally around what you need to do. How you're going to do that is completely up to you. And like I said, if you turn cybersecurity, turn it on high and walk away, you're going to burn something. But the how you implement has to be combined with usability, productivity, and business continuity. You can't just stop things from happening.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying around the turning it on high, and I have experienced that.
Yeah.
And I'll share what I normally see happen in those environments. And what I'm describing is an environment where there has been decisions made, and neither good, no judgment on the decisions, to be very controlled about who can see the data. And what I've noticed often happens in the very, very controlled environments, I'm not saying always, but often, you'll see that people have figured out how to bypass the entire security infrastructure, and you're looking at them and you're like, why have you done this? And you realize they're doing it because they have to do their job.
Right.
So they put in place, they'll call them workarounds, and you're like, okay, you've got the security framework, and then you've got a workaround for the security framework. Probably not what people were anticipating, and that maybe is what happens when you leave the pot on high.
That's right.
I don't know. Have you seen that?
Yeah, absolutely. When it becomes, and first of all, it's typically not nefarious, right? They're really just trying to do their jobs. And one of the probably the oldest tricks in the book is when, there are too many passwords that you have to remember. And there are ways to implement security so that there are not 17 passwords that you have to remember. And that's a whole nother podcast. But that's a great example where I've seen the use of shared credentials. It's easier just to use my friends, and I can't call the help desk, and I don't have a great way to reset my own password. And even when I've seen this happen, even when password reset technology was put in place so that you answer a question about your dog in your high school and your mom, right? And you're able to reset your own password, people became numb to the number of times they have to enter their credentials so much so that they were frustrated and just started using their friends because they just need to work. And when that technology was put in place, they did not consider multilingual environments, where if I'm presented with a screen in English that asks me questions about my mom in my high school, and I speak a different language and I don't know what those words mean, they just give up. And while it seemed helpful, it wasn't quite there, which is what is the impact on the user community and how are they working around it? And so you get, somebody who might have spoken Ukrainian, for example, and they can't understand what's on their screen in order to reset their password, sorted to, and again, nothing nefarious. They just needed to do their job and give their tips.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying around people sharing passwords and sharing access. I have seen that a lot. It never ceases to amaze me, but you're right. It is. I've never seen it done in a nefarious way, and it's normally because the processes around it are so complex that people just can't do their job. Do you think about that individual? I'm here to do a job, and they're getting evaluated on it, measured on it, and they literally can't complete their job. So they do these things like password sharing, and then they can get their job done and stay employed. That's important to them. I think we have to realize that as we put these layers in to protect, which we have to do, we also need to make sure that we're not pushing people away from their ability to work. I don't know if you've Have you have you seen other things apart from password sharing? What other sorts of things would people do if you let that pot on high for too long? What other kinds of behaviors have you heard about or seen?
Well, one of the most extreme cases I've seen, and this happens a lot. I say this all the time. There's no easy button for this, which is turning on two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. So, in the perfect
What is multi-factor authentication?
So multi-factor authentication is where you have something you know and something you have or something you are. So for example, when I log into my computer, I know my password, but it also looks at my face, right? And people use this all the time with your iPhones, right? You just go like this and whoop, swipe up and in you go. That's two-factor authentication. So it's a combination of two of those things, something you have, something
Means
you know.
two or more, ways of checking who you are. That's what
Checking
it means.
who you are.
Yeah. What are the examples of where people have gone beyond just password sharing?
Right, and so what they've done is they've turned on multi-factor authentication. So one of the things that the questions you have to ask is, how often am I going to ask them to do this? Right? Is it once every 8-hour shift? And when answered incorrectly, which is every hour, they're entering their password and doing this, so much that they just stop doing it, right? They made it be so bad that employees have actually left the organization. First of all, they don't understand why it's there, and they don't understand why they have to do it so many times. If you get challenged for your password and looking at a screen or something else, and it becomes so onerous that you just can't do your job. First of all, you're not highly productive, that's for sure. And I've actually heard of employees leaving because it was just too much. So that's the extreme. You don't want to be there.
No. Yeah, I understand with the extreme, leaving that pot on the stove or overdoing security. Let's come back to maybe what it looks like today and build it in with cybersecurity and as it relates to sovereignty and what we're seeing today. And in today's world, is data sovereignty, which is what we're talking about today, is it more important, do you think? What are you seeing? What are you hearing out there today? Are people thinking data sovereignty has become more important to their nations than it was, say, 4 years ago? Is it rising in awareness, or are people becoming complacent? What are you hearing out there, Renita?
I think there is a greater and greater awareness around the concept of data sovereignty. Well, sovereignty and security go hand in hand, right? And so the conversations typically start with, again, the headlines, right? It starts with the headlines. Are we okay? Yeah. Are we okay? Are we going to be okay? And I think that concept of data sovereignty, which is it's our stuff, we want to keep track of it and we want to keep control of it, right? Organically just lends itself to the conversation. So yes, I think it is becoming, we're talking about it at IGA, right? I don't know how many sessions there are at the IGA conference. I'm doing one of them where, in some cases they're at a very high level where we're talking about data sovereignty, and there in some cases they're sort of in the middle, which is, all right, we've gotten this far. How do we get to stage 2 or phase 2? And there are some folks that are really just starting their journey, which is talking about, where do I start? Because we talked about the critical controls, right? And there's 153 of them, right? Where do you start? And they are organized by level 1, level 2, level 3, right? And so where do you start? And I always say at the beginning, right? They're numbered for a reason, which is number 1, do this, number 2, do this. And there are sub standards within that, but some folks are at the beginning, and no matter where you are in the journey, I think the conversations are lending themselves to, higher levels around data sovereignty versus just, how am I doing with passwords, right? So it's, again, everyone is at a different place in their journey, but I think the conversations are happening. And honestly, people are really, really trying to understand a difficult conversation, a difficult, very technical, and this was a huge technical lift, right? But it has impact on business continuity. And so they're being real troopers when it comes to, I know I don't know too much about it, but I know we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind of what you're hearing, and you're speaking at IGA as well. So IGA is on the 30th of March and the 1st of April and the 2nd of April in San Diego. You're speaking there. What are you speaking on, Renita, at IGA?
Yeah, so I'm speaking on cyber defenses, which is, as a tribal leader, what do I need to be doing right now? Right. And it's a non-technical track. And so, we try very hard to deliver concepts in a way that are not filled with, the cybersecurity jargon. That again, it took me 17 years to learn all the words right to the song, and to implement. I talk about this all the time. That I've done 153 controls, and it took me 17 years to do it. So it's not an overnight sensation kind of conversation, right? Because you can't just turn it on high and walk away. You have to understand the business implication and the business impact and the cost and the talent, and that's something that I talk about all the time is the talent. So back to your question, at any gaming association conference and trade show, I'm talking about cyber defenses and what are the not only the technical controls, what are the leadership decisions that need to be made, because it's an investment. It's an investment in people, process, or governance. We talked about that, and in some cases, technology. But I'm also doing a session with the regulators, and I do them, pretty often. And one of the favorites, like hands down, they say this is one of the favorites of the people that are attending, is you hear, I need more money, I need more money. And one of the sessions that I do is 20 things you can do without additional money. You already own the tools that you need to get a lot of these cyber defenses in place. Yes, there is some investment that will have to happen, but unless you start with, like I said, start at the beginning, a lot of folks, especially including tribes, have invested in technologies that give them the tools that they need. They just have to turn them on. But again, it's like, you got to turn this on, or you got to understand what's going to happen when I turn it on. You got to make sure you mitigate all the risk around that. I'll give you an example. Mitigate all the risk around that. Communicate that this is going to happen. This is going to happen, right? You don't flip a switch in the middle of the night.
Right.
This is going to happen. And then turn it on, and then you wait and see, is there any trouble? Where, it's like that scene in Indiana Jones where he takes the chalice, I don't know what it's called. He takes it off the thing, but he replaces it with a bag of sand, right? And the whole point is to make sure that the bows and arrows and don't fly, right? Well, he didn't get it right, but at least he knew I'm going to have to do something before I make this change to make sure that there's no trouble that is going to fly. I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that we turned on at Seneca was putting a flash drive in a computer is a great way to get a virus, right? Or it's also a great way to lose data. And
so what is that? This is, you're going to give us an example, but a flash drive is a...
Yeah, describe. I got one right here. It's a USB stick, right? It's a little flash drive. You see them. You can buy them for. They used to be a lot of money. Now they hold terabytes of data, and you can buy them for $12.
Very helpful.
Right? Yeah, and so it is a cybersecurity risk to have everybody in your organization having access to a flash drive. So what we did was we polled the audience and said, okay, who's using flash drives in the performance of their work? And for some people, they didn't actually need to be using them. There was a better, sexier way for us to help them get access to the data. There was a better way to do it, and so we replaced the bad with the good. Similarly, talked to some folks that needed that. It came from the manufacturer and was used in the slot department, and so they had access to, they needed to maintain, not everyone, but certainly a group of slot techs needed access to be able to use flash drives. But by and large, everybody else we could turn it off for, and so we left it on for the people that needed it and to be able to continue doing their work, and then we removed it department by department by department by department, a very slow burn, and turned it off for finance. Is there any trouble? No. Turn it off for IT. We start with ourselves.
Really?
Yep. Turn it off for IT. Turn it off for this department, and so on until it became use case driven. There are legitimate use cases for people to be able to use that that need to be able to use that technology. Everybody else we can turn it off for. And if you do that, control by control, you have a better chance of not creating dissatisfiers, if you will.
So that's a great example. And flash drives or thumb drives are an incredibly effective attack vector. And they give them out at conferences. You can take them home and plug them in. I'm interested in whether you do that, because I do not, but I'm interested if you do. But I guess the advice we would both have is those thumb drives you're given at conferences are really good for nothing. You shouldn't use them.
Right. And there's a similar conversation around the power chargers as well. But I mean, we could talk about this all day, but I think the whole point of that conversation is, understanding your user community and the use cases that require certain technologies. Make those the exception to the rule, and then, turn the rule on for the 99% of the other people for which that wouldn't be good. What I have seen, and I've used when I have hired folks to do penetration testing, is they'll take a flash drive like this and they'll brand it with a quick custom intelligence, right? And then hand them out saying, this is QCI, or they'll leave them around in the lobby, on the casino floor, in the parking lot, and it's a great way to test your cybersecurity training to see if people will just get curious and put it in their laptop or put it in their desktop, and at which point it will pop up and say, you are not authorized to flash drive. You've now been enrolled in security awareness training. So basically you failed the test, right? You should, but it's only after a lot of training, right? You don't want to gotcha people, right? And make them feel bad about their decision. But gosh, if you've been trained 5 times on you shouldn't be sticking a flash drive in your laptop, then I guess then they warrant a little more training.
So this is really good. This is a great example. It is something that doesn't cost money. You can probably already do it. Most organizations turn them off. I'm interested in what special training you would recommend for the slot department and with thumb drives, or how you go about allowing a computer to have a thumb drive enabled. Like, how do you do that? I have some ideas about it, but I'm interested in what do you do? 'Cause obviously, sounds like these people in the slots are getting things from the manufacturer, and they want to plug it into a computer. How are they trained, and what processes can they follow to maintain security in this one example? This is one of 20. You have 19 more of these, is that right?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
We're here all day.
Number one is we talk about governance, right? Is write it down. Create a policy that, for 99% of the users, USB flash drive access is going to be turned off. And that can be controlled at the user level, right? And so if I'm in finance, and it follows me, doesn't matter what computer I go to, I don't have access to that, right? And access should follow the person, right? It shouldn't be tied to a computer. And so no matter where they go in the universe of this corporate environment, that is going to follow them. So number one is, the policy on this. Number two is, solid procedures around the flash drive. And then, compensating controls. You should only use the flash drive that's been provided to you by your supervisor. Don't go and, buy one from Walmart and bring it in. That's not an authorized use. So you create great programs around giving them access to the thing and the thing that you want them to have. For certain organizations, they have key technology that allow you to check in or check out and check back in a key. You can use that as well for a flash drive, which is I have access to this keyhole 17, right? And I'm going to put my thumb on the biometric reader, and I'm going to take that out and I'm going to put it back. And if I don't put it back, my supervisor is going to get notified. So those are just some controls that you can put around it, which is we're going to give you the US key, we're going to give you access to it. We're going to give you the one that we want you to use, and you're going to check it out and check it in a reasonable manner. And you can also turn it off so that it's only read only, and so you can't actually write data. In other words, they couldn't steal data from you if they had kind of some nefarious thoughts about it. They wouldn't be able to do that. So putting those controls in, and then probably most importantly is revisiting that. Like I said, there were examples, use cases where folks said we need it, to be able to do this. and we gave them better file transfer opportunities to be able to get data from one place up to another without using SneakerNet, which is what we call take the flash drive and then run over to your friend's house with it and be able to use it. So we created better ways to do the same thing as technologies emerge, as processes change, and as technical requirements change. So revisiting it is really important.
It is really important to revisit it, and you consider, for example, a lot of people have work at home environments now, and this has introduced a whole different level of cybersecurity challenges to us. And I've seen all sorts of different levels of security applied to that, and these are changes that we have to deal with. But what we don't want to do is turn up that pot so much that people start having to bypass it. So we've got to figure out the balance, and I think that's the art of cybersecurity. What do you think, Renita?
Yeah, I would agree with that. One of the things that I know that we were very fortunate to be in a position when I worked at Seneca was the ability to do remote work. And I'll tell you why. So we live in Buffalo, New York, right? And the community is used to, within 2 days we're going to have 7 feet of snow. So we had to have remote work available to
7
folks.
feet?
And so we were positioned in a great way where they only use devices that we give them. They only can connect in a very prescribed way. They only can come in through a virtual private network that is dedicated for their use. So they were used to the rules around remote work. And we were prepared for it. But to your point, many organizations were not. It's just because we're used to getting, around here, a travel ban is pretty common, especially during the January, February, which is you can't drive. You will be arrested or you could die, right? And so we were used to being able to have, certain things, certain functions that needed to be able, payroll still got to run. We'll need to pay our bills. Attorneys still need to weigh in. And do, legal documents or travel, right? And so we were in a good position. But again, that happened over the course of time. And so folks were surprised and didn't have the ability to do remote work or think about those kinds of things. Not everyone was in that position. And so again, those are the conversations you need to have ahead of time and to consider best practices when, like I said, either allowing or not allowing that to happen.
Yeah, certainly 7 feet of snow is a lot. And travel ban. I actually don't think I've ever heard of a travel ban, like driving. You're not allowed to drive on the road. I always thought if you had the right kind of tires and everything,
doesn't matter. Unless you're a first responder, you cannot drive. You will be arrested. And it's life safety, because if you get stuck, no one's going to get to you, and, people lose their lives.
Okay, so I've learned something. So what should tribal leaders do? Where do they start? Like, you're a tribal leader, you're thinking about your nation. You've got to start somewhere. What's your advice to them about what to do over the next year or two?
So one of the things that I find, and this advice comes from the practice that I do, which is to do I do cybersecurity risk assessments, right? And the forward-thinking organizations are saying, we think it's okay. Come and tell us what you think. And even the leaders in like IT departments are finding, when I come in and I do an assessment, that something that they thought was true. I'll give you an example. Password complexity, right? There's a setting, as you know, to turn on upper, lower, numeric and length, to make the passwords complex. Is that when I've done an assessment and I've come in and I've looked at it, it's almost like an audit, but I really, take a look at it, they find that some stuff has been turned off. And the technician responsible for that says, well, we were getting a lot of password calls, so we turned it off. The leadership didn't know that, and certainly upper level management didn't know that. And so I always recommend that you get an independent third-party assessment to tell you, first of all, do you have all the things in place that you think that you have in place? And number two, how do you get to the next level if you're trying to mature that aspect of the organization, so that you can answer the question, are we doing everything we possibly can to protect the tribe? And if we're not, what is the business decision that needs to be made? Because you might say on a scale of 1 to 5, we're okay at being a 2, or we're okay at being a 3, or it's really a business decision, isn't it? It's not an IT decision, because there's cost, there's impact, there's all of these things. So I always recommend an independent assessment of a third party assessment of your organization to find those surprises and to see where you are on the spectrum as it relates to if you're doing everything you can. I always recommend that it should be vendor neutral. In other words, it shouldn't be incidental to a sale. In other words, I'm going to do an assessment and say you need a widget, by the way, I'll sell you a widget. Right. And so that's, again, it should be vendor agnostic, vendor neutral. Also, it should be, I mentioned independent, so that I'm not grading my own report card. Right. And last but not least, it should be comprehensive. In other words, when you talk about all 153 controls, it should be leave no stone unturned, right? I'll tell you the story, good, bad, whatever it happens to be. But at least you have the information, and you can make an informed decision saying, you know what, we're not going to turn on whatever it happens to be. I know we don't have it and we're not going to turn it on, but at least it's a decision that someone has made from a business or a governance or a government standpoint, that those decisions aren't made in a silo. So, that's a really good place to start. In one thing that I'm very passionate about is talent development. If you don't have a cardiologist, right, and you're worried about heart health, then you need to get a cardiologist. And the same is true with cybersecurity. You have to grow that talent. I see a lot of times where somebody who has a a computer science degree, often they find themselves in a position to having to do cybersecurity. It's not that they're not talented or smart, they've just not been trained in that, and so they're running alongside of the bike, if you will, right? Trying to figure out very quickly, how do I do this? How do I do this well? So talent development is very important in tribal organizations and gaming operations. And one of the things that I bring to the table is free cybersecurity training and an exam voucher for anybody. I only work for tribes, but for anybody who's interested. And so if they want foundational cybersecurity training on demand, self-paced, at your own pace, for free, we can connect people with that. So, it's you can't say you need to get all the cybersecurity stuff in place and then not have people to be able to, the hands and the minds that can do that kind of work.
So it's a very special offer, free cybersecurity training. Now, I want to go back to the assessment, because you talked about the 20 things. Is it fair to say that as a part of the assessment, you're going to also say, and by the way, here are 20 things that some of which you could improve on or not? Is it a part of that assessment program?
Yeah, it's part of what I do. That's for sure. I can't speak for everyone, but yes, I will make recommendations, which is turn this on, light this up. I don't know why it's off, but you can do this for free, and you can do this at it's very little risk. Right? It doesn't cost any money, and it's very little risk. It's not going to have a huge impact. Where there's something, but everything should flow through their change management, whether there's zero risk, which there's no such thing, or that's very high risk, it should flow through your change management, gives it visibility. Everybody knows at midnight tonight, something is going to get turned on. And we are staffed and ready with our support phones, ready to take your call, and we're ready to back it out if to the point of turning on high and walk away, right? We're ready to watch for trouble, and we're ready to back it out. So yes, I always make recommendations, not only just to turn something on, but oftentimes on a scale of 1 to 5, if I'm rating the maturity of a certain control, if an organization's at a 3 and they can very quickly get to a 5, I will tell them, if you do these 2 things, and again, they don't cost you any money, this is as solid as you possibly can get. And they didn't, oftentimes, because I have those accelerating knowledge, that I bring to the table, I can say, just turn this on. And if something changes, you're going to know about it. And so you're not going to be surprised by somebody turning something down or turning it off.
Well, this is it's funny. Cybersecurity, data sovereignty, I think are 2 of the most important things to get right. I've personally have experienced quite a few times what happens when people don't get it right, and I've been on the cleanup crew. I'll leave those discussions for another day.
Yeah, that's a common question that I get, Andrew, which is, can I call you when we get hacked? And I say, no, call me before then, right? That's the value proposition, which is how about we just avoid the headlines, right? So
Goodness. Yeah. So, okay. So we're heading into IGA. Sounds like you've got two places you'll be there. Sounds like you'll be there throughout. Where can people get a hold of you, Renita? What's the best way of getting a hold of you if they want to follow up and about the incredibly generous free training for tribal nations and about a cybersecurity assessment that might have 20 free things you can do. So
correct.
hopefully not 23 free things. That would be bad.
Yeah.
But where can they get a hold of you, Renita?
So the best way is to find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy to find, or follow me on LinkedIn. I'll tell you where I am because I'm doing a bit of a road show now. Kind of starts the spring travel cycle for me. I'll be at the Tribal ISEC Cybersecurity Summit next week. Yeah, next week. I'll be at IGA the end of March. I have a couple proposals in for some other sessions, but the best way to find me is to just find me on LinkedIn, and there are links that'll take you to my website where you can actually book a consultation. I do offer a complimentary consultation for every tribe, every tribal nation, because it's something I'm very passionate about is giving back. So a 1 hour complimentary consultation for any tribe that's out there, and then the rest I'll get them any information they want on the 20 things or on how to connect for free cybersecurity training.
Well, that's a great connection. I would encourage people to do it. You're right. Reaching out before you get hacked is a lot more fun than after, and I've been on both sides of this. I know what the after is like, and it really isn't fun. Some of the most unfun things you can be doing is dealing with that. I don't know if you've had to deal with it, but I certainly have seen it, felt it, experienced it firsthand. I really thank you for your time today, Renita, and for sharing. And I know we both share a passion about cybersecurity and data sovereignty.
I really enjoyed the conversations. And again, this is something that I could talk about all day, but where can they find me? Well, again, if you're going to be at IGA, I'll be on the stage. Look for my session on, again, cyber defense. It is a panel discussion. And listen, I'm bringing one of the best Microsoft cybersecurity, well, not just cybersecurity, but one of the best Microsoft experts to the table, which is I'm super excited. I haven't met her in person, but she is, one of the what we call cyber aunties that are out there helping tribes out, helping organizations out, but also helping to develop talent, which is part of our mission and our passion is developing talent. So come do what I do. Come take my job.
That's incredibly generous. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. This has been QCI Pod. We like to get out there and talk to these amazing people and hear their stories and share back and giving. This is our way of giving back. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you for having me. It's been fun. Always a good conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.